Imagine a child vanishing from a home where she was supposed to be safe, and no one notices for months. No missing persons report, no frantic search, just silence, until a single police check changed everything. Her name is Oakley Carlson. She was only 5 years old when she disappeared, and the most chilling part is this. We still don't know when it happened, how it happened, or why the people responsible for protecting her chose secrecy instead of help. Before we go deeper, if you believe in sharing stories that can help bring missing children home, please consider subscribing. On this channel, every view, every share, every person who joins us becomes part of a community that refuses to let these children be forgotten. Your support truly helps keep their stories alive. Oakley had bright brown eyes, a curious smile, and a laugh that could light up a room. Teachers from her preschool said she was playful, kind, and loved to help others. She should have been getting ready for kindergarten. She should have been learning to ride a bike, giggling about her favorite cartoons, making little drawings with crayon hearts. Instead, we're left with a haunting question. Where is Oakley Carlson? To understand this tragedy, we must go back to before Oakley was even born. Her parents, Jordan Bowers and Andrew Carlson, had long struggled. Reports show their home was not a safe environment for children. There were concerns about drugs, concerns about domestic violence, concerns that the state of Washington couldn't ignore. So when Oakley was born, she was taken into foster care. And for a while, Oakley thrived. Her foster family, people who loved her deeply, watched her learn her first words, take her first steps, and celebrate her birthdays with real joy. They described her as funny, strong, and incredibly smart. She had stability, she had love, and she was safe. But then, everything changed. Despite warnings, despite evidence, despite the desperate pleas of her foster family, Oakley was taken from the only home she knew and returned to her biological parents. The state decided her parents had improved enough. Oakley was ripped away from the people she called mom and dad, and placed back into danger. Imagine being 4 years old, confused, scared, no longer understanding why you can't sleep in your own little bed, no longer allowed to hug the people who kept you safe. Oakley didn't have the words to ask why. She didn't have the power to say no. And she didn't have anyone left to fight for her. By the time December 2021 came around, Oakley had been back with her biological parents for nearly a year. During that time, photos of her stopped appearing on social media. Neighbors rarely saw her outside. And then, the moment that should haunt everyone. A deputy sheriff arrived at the Carlson home to check on another one of the children. He casually asked them, "Where's Oakley?" What came next set off alarm bells. The parents gave excuses. They claimed she was with friends, then that she boarded a bus, then that she was in the woods. Every story changed. None of them explained why they never reported her missing. Police soon realized something terrifying. No one, not a neighbor, not a teacher, not a relative, had seen Oakley for months. 5 years old. Gone. And the people responsible didn't seem afraid or even concerned. Investigators searched the home. What they found made things even darker. There were children's toys, children's clothes, but none of them belonged to Oakley anymore. It was as if she'd been erased. One of Oakley's siblings, a child too young to fully understand, told investigators something horrifying. Oakley is no more. Another mentioned that their mother had beaten Oakley and kept her locked in a room. That child also said Oakley had needed medications, but hadn't received them for a long time. And yet still, no one was willing to tell the truth about what happened to her. This is where the real fear begins. Did something happen inside that house? Did someone panic and hide the truth? Or is Oakley still out there somewhere, alive, waiting for someone to find her? As the investigation deepened, the parents were arrested, not for Oakley's disappearance, but for endangerment of the other children in the home. They remain uncooperative, never admitting where Oakley is, never showing remorse, never helping the search. Their refusal has turned this already devastating case into a nightmare. Parents are supposed to protect their children. They are supposed to be the safe place in a dangerous world. But sometimes tragedy begins inside the very home where a child sleeps. And sometimes the systems designed to protect children fail in the most unforgivable way. While we search for answers about Oakley, there's something every parent and guardian must remember. Children often can't ask for help. They can't call the police or report abuse. They rely on adults, neighbors, teachers, family members, to notice when something is wrong. That's why you must always watch for the warning signs. Sudden withdrawal, unexplained injuries, constant hunger, fear of going home, or a child suddenly disappearing from public view. If you ever notice a child who seems to vanish, don't assume they moved. Don't assume everything is fine. Ask questions. Speak up. You might be the one person who saves a life. We need people who pay attention because Oakley needed that. She deserved that. Every child does. As we continue this story in part 2, the unanswered questions will only grow more disturbing. Investigators begin to uncover details that suggest Oakley was suffering long before anyone noticed she was missing. People closest to the family reveal chilling behavior and potential motives. And the search for Oakley becomes a race against time, because if she is alive, every second matters. But until then, remember this. If you ever feel like something is wrong, trust that feeling. Children don't just disappear. Someone always knows something, and someone must speak for them. Oakley should be home. She should be laughing. She should be safe. Yet here we are, still searching, still hoping, still fighting for a child the world failed to protect. If you know anything about the disappearance of Oakley Carlson, please contact the Grays Harbor County Sheriff's Office. Your information, no matter how small, could help bring her home. And if you're a parent or caregiver listening to this, please hug your child a little tighter tonight. Look into their eyes and tell them they are loved. Because every child deserves what Oakley lost: security, protection, and a future filled with happiness. This isn't just a case. This is a call to action. The search for Oakley Carlson had barely begun when investigators realized something horrifying. Nobody could tell them the last time Oakley had been seen alive. Not the school district, not her neighbors, not her family members. The timeline was broken, shattered into conflicting stories, gaps, and lies. Deputies tried to reconstruct her final known moments. They interviewed anyone who might have had contact with the family. Some said they hadn't seen Oakley since the summer. Others thought maybe fall. But one neighbor described something that still chills the officers today. She had seen a little girl, who looked like Oakley, running alone through the woods behind the Carlson home. A child, scared and dirty, as if she had been hiding. When the neighbor tried to approach her, the girl darted away and vanished among the trees. That was possibly months before police even asked about Oakley. When investigators questioned the parents again, the answers only became stranger. Oakley's father mentioned something about a fire he claimed Oakley had started. But when pressed, he admitted he had never actually seen her do it. It was just something Jordan, her mother, told him. And that fire? It had destroyed part of the family's home earlier in the year. Could this fire have been a turning point? Could it have been the moment Oakley disappeared? Police searched the property thoroughly. They brought in dogs. They looked through the woods, turned over old debris, inspected cars, sheds, and anything that could hide a small body. They searched wells and waterways nearby. Every minute weighed heavy on their shoulders, because if Oakley was still alive, time was running out. Meanwhile, detectives were reviewing past welfare checks, social worker notes, and the decision that returned Oakley to her biological parents. It quickly became clear. Oakley's suffering didn't start the day she vanished. It began the day she was taken away from the only safe home she had ever known. Her foster family, who spent years loving her, were devastated when they learned she was missing. They had repeatedly raised concerns before she was returned to her biological parents. They warned the state that Oakley was thriving under their care, bonded, safe, and that tearing her away could be dangerous. Their hearts broke when they heard she was gone. They had fought so hard to keep her protected, and the system refused to listen. This isn't just a story about one child. It's a story about how the system that promises to protect children can also fail them catastrophically. Sometimes decisions are rushed. Sometimes warnings are ignored. And the consequences can be irreversible. While the investigation continued, detectives interviewed Oakley's older sister again. She was old enough to understand that something terrible had happened, even if she didn't have all the details. She told investigators that she hadn't seen Oakley in a very long time, and that their mother told her never to talk about Oakley. She also said she believed her little sister was in the woods. Those words alone were enough to send search teams back out, combing every inch of the nearby forest. Search crews found many things: animal bones, abandoned belongings, even children's items lost by hikers or campers. But nothing that could confirm where Oakley was or what happened to her. The deeper investigators looked into Jordan and Andrew, the darker the reality became. Their home had been described as chaotic and filthy. Drugs were found inside. Abuse was suspected not only toward Oakley but toward the other children too. The sheriff later said something that struck many people like a punch to the stomach. If Oakley were alive and in that house, she would have been found. That statement suggested what many feared, that whatever happened to Oakley likely happened months before anyone began looking. As the case continued to unfold, the parents' behavior only fueled suspicions. They refused polygraphs. They refused to help search teams. They made excuses but provided no answers. They showed no grief, no urgency, no fear. They acted like they were trying to erase Oakley, as if speaking her name would expose their lies. But Oakley's story could not be erased. People around the world began learning her name. Social media campaigns launched. Posters spread online. Volunteers organized awareness marches. The community demanded accountability. News outlets covered the case, questioning how such a failure could happen. And then, more disturbing details emerged. A forensic search of the Carlson home uncovered blood on the blinds and front door. Investigators believe Oakley suffered some kind of physical harm. They also discovered that the parents had canceled Oakley's medical appointments and discontinued her medication long before she disappeared. This suggested a pattern, a slow, cruel decline instead of a single tragic moment. As this evidence surfaced, the community's outrage grew louder. How could two adults hide the disappearance of a child for so long? How could they continue living their lives while withholding the truth? How could they sleep at night knowing a 5-year-old girl was missing because of them? Still, detectives refused to give up. They expanded the search radius. They questioned more acquaintances, more neighbors, more relatives. They reviewed every financial transaction, every cell phone ping, every trace of movement. They looked into both parents' pasts, arrests, reports, violent incidents. They focused especially on Jordan's history, which involved serious allegations long before Oakley disappeared. Meanwhile, the foster family kept speaking out, advocating for Oakley, pleading for justice, demanding answers. They described Oakley as a child full of personality, a little girl who loved to sing and dance, who hugged people tight and giggled when tickled. They shared home videos of her smiling, running, playing. And every clip reminded the world that Oakley was not a headline. She was a little girl who deserved to grow up. As you hear this story, remember, the signs of abuse are rarely loud. They often look like silence. A child withdrawing, missing school, avoiding certain topics, becoming fearful for no obvious reason. Too often, children rely on adults to notice the quiet changes that signal danger. If you're listening and you suspect a child may be being harmed, don't second-guess your instincts. Don't wait to be certain. Reporting a concern might feel scary, but it could save a life. It could prevent another family from waking up to the nightmare of a missing child. Investigators are still fighting to find Oakley. They're searching landfills. They're searching lakes and rivers. They're reviewing thousands of files and tips. This case has become one of the most heartbreaking mysteries in recent years, and one of the most urgent. Because Oakley deserves to be found. She deserves justice. She deserves the chance to be remembered not as a missing child, but as the joyful, loving little girl she once was. The next phase of this case takes us even deeper into the troubling behavior of Oakley's parents, their criminal histories, their deception, and the disturbing inconsistencies that point to a shocking possibility. We will also explore the repeated failures of the child welfare system, failures that advocates say must be addressed to prevent another tragedy like this. As we continue, we're going to look at what the investigators found in the Carlson family's digital footprints, the search history, messages, and actions that may finally reveal when Oakley disappeared, and why no one reported her gone. We'll explore new theories, chilling statements, and the heartbreaking reality of what likely happened behind closed doors. Oakley's story is a story we cannot allow to fade away. The truth will come out, and we will continue to share her name, her smile, and her story until justice is served. She would be 8 years old this December, and yet the world still doesn't know whether Oakley Carlson is alive or dead. The last credible sighting was back in February 2021, and she wasn't reported missing until December 6th of that year, 10 months later. That delay alone tells you something went horribly wrong. Imagine this. A child returned to her biological parents after thriving in a safe foster home, only to vanish quietly. While the world watches and waits, Oakley's name echoes in court filings, in the halls of child welfare agencies, and in the frustrated hearts of those who refuse to believe the system could fail so deeply. Before we go further, if you believe every child deserves to be accounted for, if you believe truth matters and voices must be heard, please hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because it's through staying connected that these stories gain power and people stay aware. The investigative team at the Grays Harbor County Sheriff's Office re-examined foster care records, dependency files, and every media interview from Oakley's life. They discovered that Oakley had been placed with foster parents, Jamie Jo and Eric Hiles, when she was 7 months old and lived there until about age 3. In that home, she reportedly laughed, danced, drew pictures, and learned to feel safe. Then came the shift. The decision to return Oakley to her biological parents, Jordan Bowers and Andrew Carlson, sparked guilt, concern, and fear for her foster family. They raised multiple warnings to the Children's Services Agency, but their alarm was dismissed. A little over a year later, she vanished. In November 2021, something changed dramatically. A fire broke out in the Carlson home. A cigarette lighter, the father claimed, had ignited the couch. He said Oakley started it. But investigators knocked at the door and found Oakley missing. Toys and clothing of hers were gone. One sibling whispered, "There's no Oakley." When a child goes missing in that way, it's more than a disappearance. It's also a sign of neglect, of protection failing, of trust broken. Court records later revealed chilling details. Oakley was described as being locked in a cell beneath the stairs of the family home, deprived of meals, abused, neglected. This wasn't a momentary mistake. This was structural harm. Law enforcement notes that when they arrived to conduct a welfare check, they found the house filled with the stench of drug exposure, other children in danger, and an environment entirely unfit for a 5-year-old. Yet Oakley's absence was ignored until December. If you're a parent watching this story matters because it shows the hidden danger inside the home. Outside threats are frightening, but inside threats can go unnoticed. Teach yourself to recognize the signs. A child who disappears from view, refrains from contact, statements like, "There is no Oakley," from a sibling. These are red flags. Investigators searched mountain terrain, lakes, barns, abandoned buildings, everything within a 20-mile radius. They brought in cadaver dogs and aerial drones. They interviewed dozens of people, but every trail ended in questions. The most disturbing: why was Oakley never reported missing by her own parents until it was forced? Meanwhile, public outcry mounted. The case inspired debate in the Washington legislature. A bill, later called the Oakley Carlson Act, was proposed to increase accountability in foster care reunification decisions and child welfare reviews. People asked, when a child thrives in foster care and then disappears when returned to biological parents, who is responsible? Who watches the watchers? For Oakley's former foster parents, the pain is deep. Jamie Jo Hiles said each family photo is now a memory of what might have been. Halloween costumes, park rides, quiet bedtimes, cupcake smiles. Those memories demand resolution. On the streets of Oakville, Washington, you'll find flyers, digital campaigns, age progression images showing what Oakley might look like now. Investigative podcasts keep the case alive. Community donors raise tens of thousands of dollars in rewards. More than $100,000 has been offered for information. But the greatest reward would be Oakley's return, or at least justice for her and truth for her family. And yet, even with all the efforts, the case remains open. Her parents avoided direct charges in her disappearance. They pleaded guilty to unrelated child endangerment charges. Investigators still classify them as persons of interest. So what can you do now? Because awareness alone isn't enough, action is. If you ever see a child who seems hidden, not at school, not in photos, not visible, ask questions. Encourage mentoring. Support foster care transparency. And share stories like Oakley's. Because when more people know them, fewer cases stay cold. Oakley Carlson's name is no longer just a missing child headline. It has become a symbol of what happens when the systems meant to protect our children fail. It is also a symbol of what we can still change. In the years since December 2021, advocates and legislators in Washington state have examined what happened in Oakley's case. They focus on one haunting fact: a child who soared under safe foster care, returned to danger, then vanished, and nobody noticed for months. Because of Oakley, new bills were introduced to increase accountability when children are returned from foster care to their biological parents. Because of Oakley, training programs for social workers changed. Because of Oakley, communities began asking deeper questions. What happens when the adults we trust stop paying attention? For you listening now, that's the first lesson. Awareness must follow action. It's not enough to know what went wrong, we must demand that things change. Oakley's former foster mother, Jamie Jo Hiles, speaks at classrooms to this day. She holds pictures of Oakley in her arms, tells students about the difference between safe homes and unsafe ones. She shouts out loud what Oakley could not when she was 5. You matter. Your voice matters. We will not forget you. Families across the country now use Oakley's story when speaking with children about safety, visitation, adoption, and guardianship. Her legacy lives far beyond the small town of Oakville. And yet, the pain remains. Oakley would be 8 now. 8. She would walk into first grade, laugh with friends, maybe ride a scooter, play tag. Instead, the world holds onto her absence. Parents whisper her name as they tuck in their children, reminding themselves to keep doors locked, to look at the people their children trust, and to notice the small signs the world says don't matter. Here's your second lesson. Protection is not passive. It doesn't mean installing alarms or locking doors. It means paying attention, reacting, staying informed. Signs of trouble are often quiet. Missed checkups, children wanting to stay hidden. For a child in danger, silence is a trap. Investigators say that if Oakley were alive today, she could be somewhere with a new identity, possibly in hiding, possibly under a different name. They fear she might still be in the Pacific Northwest, or even across borders. The trail has gone cold in many ways, but the hope remains. A reward now stands for information. The sheriff's office regularly publishes age progression images showing what Oakley might look like now: growing, changing, still missing. Your third lesson. A missing child becomes colder every second. That urgency doesn't disappear with time. The longer a case stays unresolved, the more important memory, visibility, and community become. If you see a face, a name, a photo, share it. You might not fix the entire system, but you can make the difference in one case. Before we reach the end, if you believe stories like Oakley's matter, and if you believe no child should be invisible in the systems we trust, subscribe for more stories that matter. Because while one video can inform, a community can change the world. Today, as you watch this video or scroll through these words, I want you to think of one thing. What would you do if this story were your child? How would you act? Who would you call? How would you plead for them? Use that answer as your action. Parents, teachers, caregivers, ask the hard questions. Ask why a child doesn't show up at school. Ask why a child isn't in photos anymore. Ask why a child's medical checkups are missed. Don't accept that a child is just shy or just quiet. Stay present. Stay alert. The final chapter of Oakley's story hasn't been written yet, and in many ways you and I, and every person watching, are part of that writing. Because when more people know the name, the pressure grows. Because when more voices share her story, hope doesn't fade. It echoes. Oakley should be home, She should be 8, running barefoot in grass, smiling for a picture. Instead, we wait. But waiting doesn't mean inaction. Waiting means we watch. We ask. We speak. We remember. If you know anything at all, about Oakley Carlson's disappearance, contact the Grays Harbor County Sheriff's Office in Washington. Your tip could break the silence. Your awareness could bring justice. Let this be your call. One share, one conversation, one awareness campaign can shift the tides of missing child cases. Don't scroll past. Don't forget. Like, share, and subscribe. Be the part of the story that leads to resolution. Because for Oakley Carlson, the story is still unfinished. And for us, it begins now.